Hello, we're gonna do here's my Apush podcast. So without any further ado, I think we can just begin. So where do we stop off last time? We were talking about Bunker Hill, talking about the American Revolution, how it completed, how the colonists managed to win a surprising victory. So I have some notes here scribbled a little bit, but I'm going to sort of talk more than the notes I have here. So the revolution, it created a lot of different things. One of the main ones was the Articles of Confederation. The creation of the Articles of Confederation was sort of our first attempt to sort of make sort of a union between the states, because immediately after the revolution, every single state sort of tried to write its own legislation. But the AOC was rather weak. It had a lot of limitations. They couldn't tax. They couldn't declare war. They couldn't have a standing army, and this weakened the new union a lot. And for example, there's been a rebellion known as the Shays Rebellion, and that was where Daniel Shay rebelled against the Massachusetts, I believe. I forgot the exact ordinance he was obeying against, but he had a rebellion, but eventually put down. So they established what's known as the Convention of Demigods. These were basically just well-educated men, and they were so valued for their education, they were called demigods, which shows you the value they had. For example, Ben Franklin. Here's an interesting note, Ben Franklin. If you've ever read his those do-good letters, they're very interesting. It's sort of the perspective of an older, like, sort of woman on current society. Like, she writes about how men should dress. And it was actually his brother actually owned a mill. Printing. His brother owned a printing press, and he wanted to be printed in that, but after many tries, he didn't get to be printed. But anyway, Ben Franklin, Alexander Hamilton. Actually, I just thought of something else about Ben Franklin. Sort of side note here, tangent here. But Ben Franklin also was very, very interesting about Ben Franklin here. Was that Ben Franklin? He had this sort of exercise to improve his writing style, where he would take a good writing from the piece known as The Spectator. He would take good writing. He would sort of get the general sentiment, try to rewrite it in his own style, rearrange the hints, and sort of rewrite the things. But anyway, there's also the Patriots in Philadelphia. They all gathered in Philadelphia. And why did they gather in Philadelphia? Because they realized that we need to dispense with the Articles of Confederation. So they came up with a better idea. They discussed it. And the new Constitution had a lot of compromises. It was not a sort of radical thing. There were many compromises to sort of have everyone agree. Some of the ones are the following. Bicameral legislation. The Senate has equal representation for each state, and the House of Representatives basically has based on population. So that's sort of a concession. States such as that knew they didn't have a high population wanted to have equal representation, which was how it was in the Articles of Confederation. Actually, 3/5 of each slave was counted as a human. So slaves. So if you had a bunch of slaves, you could count them sort of towards your thing. That is slightly dehumanizing, but yep. And there were also a couple of safeguards for the Constitution, the checks and balances system. And also for the conservatives too. Like, for example, the fact that judges could serve for lives is very appealing to the conservatives because they didn't want a lot of these shifts in power. Okay, next point. Let's talk about the lagging states. There were a couple states that were sort of like took a while to take their own little time to sign. For example, New York, Virginia. New York was a very notable one because the fact that it was such a big economy. The fact that they lagged was a little bit concerning, but eventually they got everyone to sort of sign the Articles of Confederation. The legacies. I think that's probably the most important thing to talk about right now. The legacy. And yeah, the conservatives did win in a lot of things where they got their a lot of things. Anyway, legacy. It inspired other revolutions. It sort of set the standard for what a modern republic could look like. And now I'll move on to the next topic because I'm running out of time here. Okay. Washington was the first president. They established him because he was by de facto. He was the first. He was not elected actually. He was sort of de facto. Everyone agreed. Let's make this guy the president. He set a couple presidents. He had a cabinet to advise him in what to do. And there was, as we also know, there's a Bill of Rights in the Constitution. That was a big precedent because big precedent because the standardized rights, for example, John Locke would have thought for life, liberty, and property, but here in the Constitution is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. These things were formalized and given to each American citizen. Hamilton wanted a national bank. That's very notable. Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, opposed it, and this was sort of, and he funded, and eventually Hamilton got his way after Washington agreed with him. And he funded this with excise taxes and also import taxes. And this was sort of the main conflict of this time. Federalists, people who wanted really a lot of national control, versus anti-federalists who want a lot of state-level control, and that's still happening to this day in issues. But and there's also the so as you see, people like Samuel Adams, they definitely did not want this sort of federalism. Okay, so I'm running out of time here, so let me just cap it off real quick. Okay, what was the most surprising thing? The most surprising thing was I didn't realize. I thought our Constitution was more radical than it actually was. I think that's because in our association we view it as this radical movement from compared to the British monarchy. We're like, what a radical movement, and it is radical. I'll agree with that, but there are things that are there that are decently thing. How does it relate to my real life? Well, I think it relates to my real life the same it relates to many Americans. A lot of the same issues that happened during these times are still occurring to this day. That's why some people say the American Revolution is still occurring. For example, like states' rights versus national rights. You can see that, and there are issues where states' rights or national rights. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but for example, abortion even could be a kind of often is sort of conflated. Not conflated. Is often an example of this issue because some people believe it should not have a national regulation at all. It should only be state regulated. And there's debate still going on to this day. I personally don't have an opinion on that yet. But yeah, all right, thank you guys so much. And there's also a couple protests to the Union, very important ones. There's a lot of new ordinances, but yes, that's the main idea. Thank you.